The fluorescent lights of courtroom 3B hummed, a stark contrast to the electric tension that crackled around 16-year-old Nia Washington. Judge Harrison, a man whose gavel seemed an extension of his own unyielding will, peered over his half-moon spectacles. "Nia Washington, for the third time, do you have legal representation?" he boomed, his voice echoing off the paneled walls. Nia, her braids meticulously woven, but now slightly askew from nervous fidgeting, clutched her worn backpack. "No, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but her gaze, though frightened, held a flicker of defiance. "My public defender, he's not here." The judge's scowl deepened. "Then we proceed. The charge of grand larceny stands." Around them, murmurs rippled through the gallery, a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. Nia Washington had always understood the precarious balance of her life. Growing up in the bustling, vibrant community of South Crenshaw, Los Angeles, she was acutely aware of the invisible lines that separated her world from others. Her mother, Denise, a tireless nursing assistant at St. Mary's Hospital, instilled in Nia and her older brother, Marcus, the unshakable belief in education as their escape hatch. "Books are your passport," Denise would often say, her voice firm but laced with a mother's fierce hope. "Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong." Nia lived by those words. She was a scholar at Crenshaw High, her grades a testament to countless late nights poring over textbooks, while the sounds of the city hummed outside her window. She excelled in debate, her sharp intellect and articulate arguments earning her a scholarship offer from UCLA, a dream that felt both within reach and impossibly far away. But dreams, she was learning, could be fragile things. Her father, James, had been a local hero, a community organizer who fought for better schools and safer streets. He'd taught Nia to question authority, to speak truth to power, but also to understand the nuances of the system. He'd died suddenly 2 years prior, a heart attack robbing Nia of her strongest advocate and leaving a void that even Marcus, with his quiet strength, couldn't entirely fill. Marcus, a decade older, had left Los Angeles years ago for Georgetown law, a path his father had always championed. He called regularly, his voice a comforting anchor, but the distance felt vast, especially now. The charge of grand larceny was a cruel joke. Nia, who saved every dollar from her part-time job at the local library, who recycled cans and scoured thrift stores for clothes, was accused of stealing a high-end designer handbag from Chic Couture, a boutique on Melrose Avenue. The incident had happened 3 weeks ago. She'd been on her way to a debate competition downtown, cutting through Melrose as a shortcut to the bus stop, when she'd seen a commotion. A woman, frantic, pointing, a store manager, his face red with fury, and then a police officer, his gaze sweeping the street, landing on Nia. She was wearing a borrowed navy blazer, her debate team uniform, and carrying her usual oversized canvas bag filled with research notes. Her appearance, she later realized, had been unremarkable, easily overlooked, but for some reason, the officer had approached her. "Ma'am, did you just come out of that store?" he'd asked, his tone brusque. She'd explained she was just passing through. He'd looked at her backpack. "Mind if I take a look?" She'd felt a prickle of unease, but with nothing to hide, she'd consented. Her backpack contained a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, her debate notes on economic disparity, and a half-eaten granola bar. Nothing remotely resembling a stolen handbag. Yet, here she was. The store manager, Mr. Alistair Finch, had pointed her out in a shaky lineup a day later. "That's her," he'd insisted, his finger trembling. "The red backpack. I saw her run out with the bag. It was the only red backpack I saw." Nia's backpack was navy blue. She'd explained this, calmly, repeatedly. The police officer, Officer Miller, had scribbled notes, his expression unreadable. Nia's public defender, A perpetually harried man named Mr. Henderson had met with her twice. Both times he'd seemed distracted, overwhelmed. He'd mumbled something about a heavy caseload, the system, and the unfortunate reality that sometimes things just stick. He hadn't seemed to believe her, not really. He'd advised her to consider a plea deal, a juvenile diversion program, anything to avoid a trial. "It's a strong case against you, Nia," he'd said, avoiding her eyes. "There's an eyewitness, a store manager. Optics aren't good." But Nia knew she was innocent. She wouldn't plead guilty to something she didn't do. Not when her future, her UCLA scholarship, depended on her clean record. Not when her father's legacy, her mother's sacrifices, hung in the balance. So she had insisted on a trial, even as Mr. Henderson sighed, a sound that spoke volumes of his pessimism. Now Mr. Henderson was conspicuously absent, and Judge Harrison's patience was clearly wearing thin. "This court will not be delayed by absent counsel," the judge declared, his voice cutting through the silence. "Ms. Washington, do you wish to proceed without representation, or shall I assign you new counsel now and reschedule?" Nia looked out at the sparse gallery. Her mother was there, her face a mask of worry, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Next to her sat Ms. Evelyn, their elderly neighbor, a pillar of their church community. They were her only support system in this sterile, unforgiving room. Rescheduling meant more delays, more missed school, more anxiety for her mother. It meant prolonging this nightmare. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I wish to proceed, Your Honor." The words felt heavy, yet resolute. A small gasp rippled through the few spectators. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow, a hint of disdain in his gaze. "Very well," he said, the gavel poised. "Let the record show the defendant chooses to proceed pro se." The trial began, not with a bang, but with a series of dismissive gestures and a sense of preordained outcome. Judge Harrison, a man whose reputation for being tough on crime preceded him, seemed to view Nia with a mixture of impatience and skepticism. He rushed through procedural matters, barely allowing Nia time to grasp the legal jargon. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, played by rules that weren't designed for her. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Mr. Davies, was a young, ambitious lawyer with a smooth demeanor and an air of detached confidence. He presented his case with practiced ease, painting Nia as a calculated thief. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice resonating with theatrical conviction. "The evidence will show that on the afternoon of October 12th, Ms. Nia Washington, here present, deliberately entered chic couture, absconded with a designer handbag valued at over $2,000, and attempted to flee the scene." He called Mr. Alistair Finch to the stand. Finch, a man in his late 40s with a meticulously groomed mustache, recounted his version of events. "I saw her clear as day," he insisted, pointing a manicured finger at Nia. "She snatched the bag right off the display. A red backpack. Distinctive. She ran out, and I immediately called the police." He embellished details, claiming Nia had looked suspicious even before entering the store, that her eyes darted nervously. Nia felt a cold dread creep through her. His certainty was chilling, his lies infuriating. When it was her turn to cross-examine, Judge Harrison gave her minimal guidance. "Ms. Washington, you may question the witness." Nia stood, her knees feeling like jelly. "Mr. Finch," she began, her voice a little shaky, "you said my backpack was red, is that correct?" Finch nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, distinctly red." "And you are certain it was red?" Nia pressed, remembering her navy blue bag. "Absolutely," he declared, puffing out his chest. "I have an excellent memory for details, especially when my merchandise is involved." "Mr. Finch, what color is the backpack I am carrying today?" Nia asked, holding up her navy blue canvas bag, which was now empty save for a pen and a small notebook. Finch squinted. "That appears to be navy blue." He seemed momentarily flustered, but quickly recovered. "But the one that day was red, I assure you," Mr. Davies interjected. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is clear about the day in question." Judge Harrison sustained the objection, cutting Nia off. "Stick to relevant questions, Ms. Washington." Nia felt a wave of despair. It was as if her truth was being willfully ignored. The judge's demeanor, Mr. Finch's unwavering testimony, it was all conspiring against her. Next, Officer Miller took the stand. He testified to responding to the call, apprehending Nia, and the store manager identifying her. "She fit the description," he stated, his voice flat. "Young, African-American female carrying a backpack." He omitted any mention of the backpack's color. "Officer Miller," Nia asked, trying to keep her voice steady, "when you approached me, did you search my backpack?" "Yes, ma'am, with your consent." "And did you find a designer handbag inside?" "No, ma'am." "Did you find anything resembling a designer handbag?" "No." "Did you find anything that would suggest I had just committed a grand larceny?" Mr. Davies objected again. "Calls for speculation, Your Honor." Judge Harrison sustained it. "Move along, Ms. Washington." Nia felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She couldn't crumble, not now. Her mother's worried gaze spurred her on. She had to fight. But how could she fight against a system that seemed predetermined to find her guilty? During a brief recess, her mother approached her. "Nia, baby, are you okay?" Denise's voice was thick with suppressed emotion. Nia managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, Ma. I don't understand how they can just ignore the truth." "They don't want the truth, honey," Denise said softly, her eyes filled with a pain Nia recognized as a weariness born of a lifetime of similar battles. "They want a conviction." She squeezed Nia's hand. "Did you try calling Marcus again?" Nia shook her head. "He's probably busy, Ma. He's the Attorney General's. He's really busy." She'd tried calling him a few times when this first started, leaving vague messages about a legal issue, not wanting to burden him with her troubles, especially not something so seemingly trivial as a misunderstanding. She hadn't imagined it would escalate to this. She hadn't wanted to bother him, knowing the immense responsibilities he carried. Her brother, Marcus Washington, had risen to incredible heights, a testament to their father's teachings and his own relentless drive. He was now a high-ranking official in the U.S. Department of Justice, whispered by many to be on the fast track to the very top. He had his own battles to fight, far bigger than a stolen handbag. But as the judge called them back into session and Mr. Davies began his closing arguments, confidently reiterating the irrefutable evidence of Nia's guilt, a desperate thought sparked in Nia's mind. She looked at her mother, who silently nodded, her eyes conveying both fear and a desperate hope. The jury, comprised of 6 men and 6 women, many of whom seemed to avoid Nia's gaze, filed back into the courtroom after barely an hour of deliberation. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. An hour? That was impossibly fast. It signaled either a quick acquittal or a swift conviction. A cold certainty settled over her. It wouldn't be an acquittal. Judge Harrison, with an almost imperceptible smirk, looked out at the assembled court. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a stern-faced woman in a sensible pantsuit, rose. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." A hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the frantic click of a reporter's camera from the back row. Nia felt her mother's hand tighten around hers, a desperate, unspoken prayer. Nia focused on a crack in the wall, trying to control her breathing, to prepare for the inevitable. The air felt heavy, suffocating. "Will the foreperson please read the verdict?" Judge Harrison commanded, his voice devoid of any warmth. "On the charge of grand larceny, we the jury find the defendant, Nia Washington." The foreperson paused, taking a breath that seemed to stretch into an eternity. Guilty. The word hit Nia like a physical blow. Guilty. Her mind reeled. The UCLA scholarship, her dreams, her mother's sacrifices, all of it crashing down around her. Her vision blurred, and the courtroom swam before her eyes. She heard her mother gasp, a choked sob. A triumphant glint flickered in Mr. Davies's eyes. Judge Harrison's expression remained impassive, almost satisfied. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the judge said, dismissing them with a wave of his hand. "Ms. Washington, please approach the bench." Nia, numb, stumbled forward. Her mother tried to follow but was gently restrained by a bailiff. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his voice low but still carrying through the silent courtroom. "Nia Washington, you have been found guilty of grand larceny. This is a serious felony. Given your age, and considering the lack of remorse displayed throughout this trial, I am inclined to make an example." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, a chilling pronouncement. "I hereby sentence you to a minimum of 6 months in the Los Angeles County Juvenile Detention Center, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. 6 months. Juvenile detention." The words echoed in Nia's mind, a death knell to her future. Her world, meticulously built on hard work and hope, was shattering into a million pieces. The injustice was so blatant, so absolute, it felt surreal. She stared at Judge Harrison, trying to find some shred of humanity, some flicker of doubt, but saw only cold, unyielding authority. "Your Honor," Nia began, her voice hoarse, desperate. "I'm innocent. I didn't do this. There's no real evidence." Judge Harrison merely scoffed. "The jury has spoken, Ms. Washington. Your appeals for innocence are now moot." He turned to the bailiff. "Take her into custody." As the bailiff approached, Nia's mind raced. 6 months. Her scholarship would be revoked. Her life would be irrevocably altered. This couldn't be happening. She thought of her father, of his lessons on fighting for justice, of the power of truth. She thought of Marcus, of his unwavering belief in her, of his advice to always use your voice, Nia, even when it trembles. Her eyes darted to her mother, who was now openly weeping, her face buried in her hands. The image ignited a spark of fierce defiance within Nia. She couldn't let this destroy them. She remembered the desperate conversation with her mother in recess, the unspoken plea in her mother's eyes. Taking a shaky breath, Nia spoke, her voice still trembling but gaining strength. "Your Honor, before you finalize this, before I am taken away, I need to make one phone call." Judge Harrison, clearly irritated by the interruption, sighed dramatically. "Ms. Washington, you've had ample opportunity to make calls. Sentencing has been pronounced." "It's a very important call, Your Honor," Nia insisted, looking directly into his eyes, a newfound resolve hardening her features. "To my brother." "And who, pray tell, is your brother, Ms. Washington, that he merits such an urgent interruption of justice?" the judge asked, a condescending sneer playing on his lips, clearly expecting some inconsequential relative. Nia took another deep breath, her gaze unwavering. She looked directly at Judge Harrison, then at Mr. Davies, and finally at the few reporters still lingering. "My brother, Your Honor," she stated, her voice clear and strong, no longer a whisper, "is Marcus Washington, the U.S. Attorney General." The words dropped into the silent courtroom like a bombshell. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The air, already thick with tension, now crackled with an entirely different kind of energy. Judge Harrison's dismissive smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of stunned disbelief. Mr. Davies, who had been gathering his papers, froze, his eyes wide. The reporters, sensing a seismic shift, scrambled for their phones and notebooks. The world had just tilted on its axis. The silence that followed Nia's revelation was deafening, a thick, palpable shock. Judge Harrison's face, usually a mask of stern authority, paled visibly. His eyes, moments ago filled with condescension, now darted nervously, first to Nia, then to the stunned faces in the gallery, and finally to the now frenzied reporters. The confident, almost smug demeanor he had worn throughout the trial evaporated, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. Mr. Davies, the prosecution, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His mouth hung slightly open, his carefully constructed composure shattered. He glanced at Nia, then back at the judge, a dawning horror creeping into his expression. The reality of what Nia had just said, and the implications for both their careers, was rapidly sinking in. Nia stood tall, her initial tremor replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a quiet, steely determination. The weight of the injustice she had just endured, the sheer audacity of the verdict and sentence, now fueled her. She watched the judge's reaction, noting the sudden shift in his posture, the way his gaze no longer met hers with dismissive superiority, but with a nascent, desperate caution. The U.S. Attorney General? Judge Harrison stammered, his voice several octaves higher than its usual booming register. He looked at Nia as if seeing her for the very first time, as if the color of her skin, her humble attire, and her quiet demeanor had suddenly been stripped away to reveal something entirely different. The image he had constructed of a petty, unremorseful thief crumbled before his eyes. "Yes, Your Honor," Nia confirmed, her voice now steady, clear, and imbued with an undeniable authority. "My older brother, Marcus Washington. He's been incredibly busy, and I hadn't wanted to bother him with my personal affairs, but it seems I have no other recourse." Her tone was calm, almost regretful, but the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. "You pushed me to this. This is on you." Judge Harrison cleared his throat, a dry, raspy sound. "Well, Ms. Washington, I suppose a brief recess is in order, to allow you to make this important call." He avoided Nia's eyes, fumbling with his gavel, a stark contrast to his earlier confident pronouncements. "Bailiff, escort Ms. Washington to a private room where she can make her call." The bailiff, who had been about to lead Nia away to detention, now looked utterly bewildered. He glanced at the judge, then at Nia, a mixture of surprise and sudden respect in his gaze. He nodded, gesturing for Nia to follow him to a small consultation room adjacent to the courtroom. As Nia walked past her mother, Denise reached out, gripping Nia's hand, her face a mixture of relief and bewildered pride. "Marcus," she whispered, her eyes wide. Nia just nodded, a small, weary smile touching her lips. "I told you to call him, baby." Inside the consultation room, the bailiff handed Nia a secure line phone, his usual brusqueness replaced by an almost deferential politeness. "Take your time, Ms. Washington," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. Nia dialed Marcus's direct line, a number etched into her memory since he first left for law school. Her heart was still pounding, but a sense of purpose now propelled her. The phone rang twice. Then a crisp, professional voice answered. "Attorney General's office, Agent Evans speaking." "Hello, this is Nia Washington," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I need to speak with Marcus. It's urgent." There was a slight pause. "One moment, please, Ms. Washington. He's in a meeting, but I'll patch you through." The speed and ease with which she was connected underscored the gravity of her brother's position. Another click, and then Marcus's familiar voice, deeper and more authoritative than she remembered, but still undeniably her brother. "Nia, is everything all right? I got your messages, but things here have been hectic. What's going on?" His tone, usually calm, held a hint of concern now. "Marcus," Nia began, her voice cracking slightly, "they just found me guilty of grand larceny, and Judge Harrison just sentenced me to 6 months in juvenile detention." She recounted the events of the trial, her voice picking up speed as the injustice spilled out. The absent public defender, Mr. Finch's false testimony, Officer Miller's omissions, Judge Harrison's dismissive attitude, the swift, unfair verdict. She detailed her Navy backpack, the lack of evidence, the judge's refusal to even consider her innocence. On the other end, Marcus listened in silence. Nia could hear the subtle shift in his breathing, the tightening of his jaw that she knew so well. When she finished, there was a long pause, a terrifying silence that spoke of raw fury. "Nia," Marcus finally said, his voice dangerously low, each word meticulously articulated. "Are you telling me that Judge Thomas Harrison, in the Superior Court of Los Angeles, just convicted my innocent 16-year-old sister of a felony based on flimsy, contradicted eyewitness testimony without proper legal representation and sentenced her to 6 months in a juvenile facility?" "Yes, Marcus," she confirmed, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "That's exactly what happened." Another pause, even longer this time. Nia could almost feel her brother's mind working, calculating, strategizing. "Okay, Nia, listen carefully. Do not say another word to anyone in that courthouse. Do not sign anything. Do not answer any questions. You are now represented. I'm on my way, and I'm bringing a team. Give me 20 minutes. His voice was no longer that of a concerned brother, but of a man of immense power, his authority undeniable. "Stay strong, little sister. Justice is coming." True to his word, Marcus Washington did not come alone. 22 minutes later, a palpable ripple of commotion started at the courthouse entrance, quickly spreading through the building like wildfire. 2 sleek black SUVs, government plates gleaming, pulled up directly to the courthouse steps. From the first vehicle emerged Marcus Washington, a figure of imposing presence. Taller than Nia, with the same sharp intelligence in his eyes, he wore a perfectly tailored dark suit that exuded power and gravitas. His expression was grim, a barely contained fury simmering beneath a veneer of controlled calm. Behind him, a retinue of impeccably dressed individuals followed. A phalanx of security personnel, 2 sharp-suited lawyers from the Department of Justice, and a woman with an official-looking badge identifying her as a federal investigator. The arrival was not subtle. It was a deliberate, authoritative statement. Inside courtroom 3B, Judge Harrison had attempted to resume proceedings, albeit with a visibly shaken demeanor. He had cleared the gallery, except for Nia's mother and Ms. Evelyn, who steadfastly refused to leave, demanding to know what was happening. Judge Harrison was pacing behind his bench, muttering to his clerk, his earlier bluster entirely gone. The court was in a state of confused limbo. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of courtroom 3B swung open with a decisive thud. All heads turned. Marcus Washington stood framed in the doorway, his gaze sweeping the room, instantly locking on to Nia, who was still in the consultation room, visible through the partially open door. His eyes, though filled with concern for his sister, also held a chilling intensity as they landed on Judge Harrison. "Good afternoon, Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. It was a voice accustomed to commanding attention, a voice that filled the room without needing to be loud. It held no deference, only a cold, unwavering authority. "I am Attorney General Marcus Washington. I believe my sister, Nia Washington, is currently being held under an unlawful conviction in this courtroom." Judge Harrison, looking like a deer caught in headlights, stammered, "Mr. Attorney General, this is highly irregular. The court has rendered a verdict." "A verdict," Marcus retorted, taking slow, deliberate steps into the courtroom, his entourage fanning out behind him. "That was reached in the absence of competent counsel, based on demonstrably false testimony and under the clear impression of judicial bias. I believe that constitutes a gross miscarriage of justice, Your Honor." He walked directly to the defense table, where Nia had been seated. He didn't even glance at Mr. Davies, who was now shrinking in his seat, utterly mortified. Marcus placed his briefcase on the table, snapped it open, and pulled out a stack of documents. "Firstly," Marcus stated, his eyes fixed on Judge Harrison, "I formally request a mistrial, based on multiple procedural errors and due process violations. Secondly, I request an immediate stay of the sentence. And thirdly, I request an immediate investigation into the conduct of this court and all parties involved in Ms. Washington's prosecution. Judge Harrison's face was ashen. He knew the U.S. Attorney General wasn't merely making requests, he was issuing directives. The weight of federal authority, immense and unyielding, had just descended upon his courtroom. His career, his reputation, everything he had built, was now in jeopardy. "Mr. Attorney General," Judge Harrison finally managed to articulate, his voice barely a whisper, "with all due respect, I am not familiar with the details of your sister's case. I was simply presiding." "Then allow me to make you familiar, Your Honor," Marcus interrupted, his voice laced with icy precision. He gestured to one of his lawyers. "Mr. Peterson, if you please." Mr. Peterson, a man with the calm, predatory air of a seasoned litigator, stepped forward. "Your Honor, the initial police report, which we have obtained, clearly states that the alleged stolen item was a red designer handbag." Mr. Alistair Finch testified that he saw Ms. Washington, a young African-American female, carrying a red backpack, and that was the basis of his identification. Peterson paused, then looked directly at Nia. "Ms. Washington, would you please show the court the backpack you were carrying on the day in question?" Nia, still a little stunned by the whirlwind of events, retrieved her navy blue canvas bag from the consultation room. She held it up. "This is my backpack, sir. It has always been navy blue." Peterson then presented a copy of Nia's school ID, which clearly showed her with the same navy blue backpack. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Peterson continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "we have obtained the security footage from an adjacent coffee shop, whose camera angle fortuitously captures the street in front of Chic Couture. This footage, time-stamped, shows Ms. Washington walking past the boutique before the alleged incident occurred, carrying her navy blue backpack, and then later shows a different individual, an adult woman, indeed running from the store with what appears to be a red bag. This individual bears no resemblance to Ms. Washington." A collective gasp swept through the now reopened gallery. Denise Washington let out a sob of relief, clutching Ms. Evelyn's hand. Judge Harrison's jaw hung open. The smug Mr. Davies looked like he was about to faint. "Your Honor," Marcus interjected, stepping forward once more, "this footage, combined with the clear misidentification of the alleged red backpack by the key witness, and the absence of any stolen merchandise in my sister's possession, unequivocally demonstrates her innocence. The public defender's absence, Your Honor's haste in proceeding without counsel, and the subsequent conviction are not just irregularities. They are a direct affront to the principles of justice this court is sworn to uphold." He paused, letting his words sink in, then delivered the final, crushing blow. "And to that end, I have already initiated a formal inquiry by the Department of Justice into the conduct of this court, including a review of all cases presided over by Judge Harrison in the past 5 years, with particular emphasis on those involving minority defendants. Officer Miller will also be investigated for potential negligence or complicity. And as for Mr. Finch, he will be facing charges of perjury and filing a false police report." Judge Harrison, his face ashen, stumbled back in his chair. The carefully constructed facade of his courtroom, of his unassailable authority, had crumbled in a matter of minutes. The power had irrevocably shifted. Nia Washington, the innocent black teen he had framed, now stood vindicated. Her brother, the U.S. Attorney General, a towering figure of undeniable authority, delivering consequences that would echo far beyond the walls of this courtroom. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Judge Harrison, stripped of his imperiousness, could only nod mutely as Marcus Washington, with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor, dismantled the flimsy case against Nia. The federal investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Agent Ramirez, immediately secured all court records, police reports and the newly presented surveillance footage. The courthouse, once a place of intimidating formality, now buzzed with an electrifying energy of exposure and accountability. Marcus, after ensuring Nia was safely with her mother, turned his full, unwavering attention to the now cowering Judge Harrison. "Your Honor," he stated, his voice devoid of any pity, "I recommend you recuse yourself from all further proceedings related to my sister's case, effective immediately." Judge Harrison, utterly defeated, could only croak, "Yes, Mr. Attorney General, of course." Mr. Davies, the prosecutor, attempted to salvage his career, stammering apologies and explanations. "Mr. Attorney General, I was merely presenting the evidence as provided. I had no knowledge of the surveillance footage, nor the discrepancy in the backpack color." Marcus merely looked at him, his gaze chillingly dismissive. "Ignorance, Mr. Davies, is not a defense for injustice. As a prosecutor, you have an obligation to seek truth, not just convictions. Your failure to thoroughly investigate, to challenge inconsistent testimony, and to protect the rights of a juvenile defendant, particularly one without adequate counsel, will be thoroughly reviewed. Your career in the district attorney's office is, I assure you, effectively over." Davies sagged into his chair, his face contorted in despair. Officer Miller, who had been called back into the courtroom for questioning by Agent Ramirez, was visibly sweating. He tried to explain away his omissions, claiming he didn't want to confuse the record with the backpack color, or that he relied on the store manager's identification. Agent Ramirez, however, was relentless. "Officer Miller, did you, at any point, consider the possibility that Mr. Finch's identification might be erroneous, given the lack of stolen goods on Ms. Washington's person and the discrepancy in the backpack color?" Miller mumbled something about standard procedure. "Standard procedure," Marcus interjected, his voice sharp, "does not involve deliberately overlooking exculpatory evidence. Your actions, Officer Miller, suggest either gross incompetence or a willful disregard for due process. The Department of Justice will be reviewing your entire service record, and I guarantee you, this incident will be at the forefront of that review." The implication was clear. Miller faced not just internal discipline, but potential federal charges for civil rights violations. The news of the Attorney General's dramatic intervention spread like wildfire. Within hours, local news vans crowded outside the courthouse, their cameras flashing, reporters clamoring for details. The story of Judge frames innocent black teen until she calls her brother, the U.S. Attorney General, became an instant national sensation. Nia, previously an invisible victim, was now the center of a groundbreaking story about systemic injustice. That evening, safely back in her modest South Crenshaw home, Nia sat on the couch between her mother and Marcus, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by an exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. Her mother, still tearful but now with tears of profound relief, held Nia's hand, stroking it gently. "I still can't believe it, Marcus," Denise said, her voice trembling. "What you did! You saved her!" Marcus, though still grim, managed a small, tired smile. "Nia saved herself, Ma. She had the courage to speak up. I just amplified her voice." He looked at Nia, his gaze filled with a fierce pride. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there sooner, little sister. I should have pressed harder when you called the first time." Nia shook her head. "I didn't want to bother you, Marcus. I thought I could handle it. No one should have to handle this kind of injustice alone, Nia," he said firmly. "Especially not a 16-year-old. This wasn't about a stolen bag. This was about a system that too often fails those who look like us, especially when they're vulnerable." He then laid out the full scope of what would happen next. Judge Harrison would face impeachment proceedings, a public inquiry into his courtroom practices, and likely disbarment. His career was over, his reputation in tatters. Mr. Davies would be fired and face sanctions from the bar. Officer Miller would be dismissed from the force and potentially face charges. Mr. Finch was already in custody, charged with perjury and false reporting. The woman in the surveillance footage, the actual thief, had been identified and apprehended. The stolen handbag was recovered. "This goes beyond just your case, Nia," Marcus explained, his gaze thoughtful. "This exposes a pattern, a judge who regularly overlooked due process, a prosecutor who didn't question, an officer who was complicit. How many other innocent people without a U.S. Attorney General for a brother, have gone through his court and been unjustly sentenced?" He took out a notebook. "We're launching a full-scale review of every conviction under Judge Harrison's tenure. We're going to find every person who was unfairly treated, every life unjustly derailed. This isn't just about clearing your name, Nia. This is about ensuring this never happens again." Nia looked at her brother, a wave of profound gratitude washing over her, mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. Her father would have been so proud. The fight for justice, she realized, was a long, arduous one. But with people like Marcus and with her own newfound strength, it was a fight they could win. The media frenzy surrounding Nia Washington's case intensified in the days and weeks that followed. National news outlets picked up the story, dissecting every detail of Judge Harrison's bias, Mr. Davis's negligence, and Officer Miller's complicity. The surveillance footage, showing the true thief, played on an endless loop, a visual testament to Nia's innocence and the system's failure. The ripple effects were seismic. Within a week, Judge Thomas Harrison was suspended without pay, pending a full judicial ethics investigation. The calls for his impeachment were deafening. Stories began to emerge from the community, tales of other defendants, predominantly black and brown, who had faced unfair trials and harsh sentences in Judge Harrison's courtroom. A local civil rights group, spurred by Nia's story, launched a hotline for individuals to report similar experiences. Mr. Davies was formally terminated from the district attorney's office, his promising career in ruins. Officer Miller was not only fired from the LAPD, but also faced federal charges for obstruction of justice and civil rights violations. Mr. Alistair Finch, facing charges of perjury, grand larceny, and filing a false police report, pleaded guilty, receiving a sentence of community service and a hefty fine. The real thief, a repeat offender, was also prosecuted. But the most significant change came from the Department of Justice itself. Under Marcus Washington's direction, a nationwide task force was established to review cases of alleged judicial misconduct and systemic bias, particularly in juvenile justice systems. Nia's Law, as it was quickly dubbed by activists and legal scholars, became a rallying cry for reform. For Nia herself, life began to slowly normalize, though forever altered. The UCLA scholarship, which had been put on hold, was reinstated with a formal apology from the university. She became an unexpected figurehead, invited to speak at community forums and legal conferences. At first, she found it overwhelming, but with Marcus's guidance and her mother's unwavering support, she found her voice again, even stronger than before. One evening, a month after the trial, Nia stood before a packed auditorium at Crenshaw High, addressing her peers, teachers, and a throng of reporters. Her debate coach, Ms. Chen, introduced her with tears in her eyes. Nia, wearing a crisp white blouse and her now famous navy blue backpack slung over her shoulder, approached the podium. "A few weeks ago," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I stood in a courtroom, accused of a crime I didn't commit. I felt invisible, I felt voiceless. I felt like the system, designed to protect us, was designed to crush me." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the audience. And for a terrifying moment it succeeded. I was found guilty. I was sentenced to detention. My dreams felt shattered. "But then," she continued, "I remembered my father's words. Speak truth to power. I remembered my mother's strength. And I remembered I had a brother who believes in justice. It shouldn't take a U.S. Attorney General to get justice. No one should have to be someone's sibling to be believed. She spoke about the biases she faced, the assumptions made about her based on her appearance and background. She spoke about the importance of education, of critical thinking, of standing up for what is right, even when it's terrifying. My experience taught me that justice isn't just a word. It's an active pursuit. It's about accountability. It's about dismantling systems that perpetuate injustice. And it's about amplifying the voices of those who have been silenced. Her speech ended with a standing ovation. Her former public defender, Mr. Henderson, was in the audience. He approached her afterwards, his face etched with shame and regret. "Nia," he said, his voice barely audible, "I am so incredibly sorry. I failed you. I let the system overwhelm me." Nia looked at him, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. "Mr. Henderson," she replied, "what happened to me needs to change the system, not just break the people in it. You have a chance to be part of that change." He nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Marcus, watching from the wings, felt a profound sense of peace. Nia was not just surviving, she was thriving, transforming her pain into purpose. He knew she would use her experience to advocate for others, to become a powerful voice for change. He had fought a battle, but Nia had ignited a movement. Weeks later, Nia was back in the Superior Court of Los Angeles, not as a defendant, but as an observer. A new judge, a woman known for her commitment to fairness and equity, presided. The courtroom felt different, less oppressive, more open. This time, Nia was there to support a young man from her community, wrongfully accused of a minor offense, whose case was now being reviewed as part of the Nia's Law initiative. He had proper representation, a diligent public defender, and a judge who listened. As the proceedings unfolded, Nia realized that the fight was far from over, but the tides were turning. Her story, once a personal nightmare, had become a catalyst for real, tangible change. She looked at the scales of justice, seeing not just the imbalance, but the possibility of balance, of redemption, of a future where true justice was not a privilege, but a right for all. Nia Washington's ordeal, born from an unjust accusation and magnified by a biased judicial system, ultimately ignited a powerful movement for reform. Her courage to speak out, coupled with the unexpected intervention of her brother, U.S. Attorney General Marcus Washington, exposed deep-seated systemic flaws. Judge Harrison's career crumbled. The negligent prosecutor and complicit officer faced severe consequences, and the Department of Justice launched nationwide initiatives to review similar cases of injustice. Nia, once a victim, transformed into an articulate advocate, her story serving as a stark reminder that while justice can be delayed and denied, truth, when amplified, has the power to dismantle even the most entrenched biases. Her journey stands as a testament to reclaiming power and sparking profound, lasting change. If Nia's story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories, and share it with someone who believes in justice. Together, we can shine a light on the truth.